This is going to be a pretty short video, but if you want to learn how to quickly edit HDR exterior images for your real estate photography business, then keep watching. This video was made specifically for readers of my book, The $1 Million Photographer, which is an A to Z guide on all things real estate photography, teaching you how to make more money in your business. If you want to pick up a copy of this ebook, then you can do so in the description below. A couple of prerequisites before we get started. If you want to use the same HDR exterior preset that I use in this video and for all my exterior photos, then you can download it for free below. I use Lightroom Classic to edit all my exterior photos, so make sure you download that to follow along as well. First, I'll open up my folder that contains all the images for the specific shoot that I want to edit, and then I'll open up Lightroom Classic, and then either pressing Ctrl-Shift-I to import or by clicking File and Import Photos. It'll take a second for all the photos to import and for previews to be fetched as well, so let's just give it a minute. Once everything is imported, we can get right into editing. But real quick though, if you want to download some raw images to practice on, I've made all of these exterior RAWs that I'm going to use in this video available for download using the link below completely for free. Okay, back to editing. First, I'll highlight all the images by clicking on the first image and then scrolling all the way to the bottom and pressing Shift and then clicking the last image to highlight all of them. We want to put all these images into their own separate brackets before we can merge them into HDRs. We'll right-click on any of the images, look for stacking, then click Auto Stack by Capture Time, which does exactly what it states. It automatically looks at the timestamps of when each photo was taken and then puts them into their own respective stacks. Because all these images were taken outside, the shutter speed is quite a bit faster than interiors, so I've found that leaving the slider around this mark, around 2 to 3 seconds, usually works best for accurately stacking the correct photos together. All right, now to merge them all into HDR images, which we're going to combine the bracketed light information from all of our raw photos. If you haven't done this in Lightroom yet, then you'll want to deselect all of the stacks and then just select the first one in your library and then hit either Control-H or right-click and hit Merge into HDR. It'll bring up a dialog box that looks like this, and you'll want to leave auto settings off and then select Combine into Stack, so your HDR is just tacked onto its respective stack. As far as ghosting settings are concerned, you'll want to leave this on none unless it was a really windy day. If it was windy and you leave ghosting set to none, you'll notice these weird looking artifacts or ghosts in your image, which is due to the software not being able to properly interpolate the data from a tree being blown in the wind between your HDR brackets. It takes a photo and it's one place, it's wind. Takes a photo, it's in another place. Just be aware though that once you set this dialog box, it'll save these settings for when you do bulk merges. So it's a good idea to check these settings after each shoot, depending on if it was windy or not. If one image ends up being particularly filled with ghosting, then you can always delete that HDR and remerge that one single stack with ghosting set to low, medium, or high, or whatever settings you need. Just play around with it. Once your settings are all dialed in, you can click merge and then wait for it to complete. After that first merge is complete, select all the stacks in your instance together and click Control-H or right-click and hit Merge into HDR. This will take some time, so go make a cup of coffee, take a shower, apply for my coaching program, whatever. But once all the HDRs are successfully merged, then I make sure they're all highlighted, go to the preset box on the right-hand side and select my exterior HDR preset. Once the preset is applied to all the merged HDRs, I'll again make sure they're all still highlighted, then click Develop to go deeper into the settings and check over each one and make any changes that need to be made. From this point, we'll just go through image by image and I'll narrate what I'm doing so you can see what I typically do in any given situation based on how the image looks. Okay, as we can see, everything is blown out. It's super bright, so we're going to get into the image by image tweaks to fix this. It was kind of twilight at this time, so you know the house was a little bit dark. The sun was right behind the house. They're not super fantastic photos. I got these really last minute for a realtor. I actually haven't even shot this house yet on the inside. I go back next week to do it all, but he wanted to get some preliminary brochures done. First off, we're gonna fix the sky, and there's no real way to do this all at once. So I just really want to drop the exposure down so we can see more of the sky more clearly. And then we'll focus on doing some masking to get the actual house itself looking nice, because right now it doesn't look so great. In here, I just want to change my verticals a little bit. Just, you know, you can see that it's not super vertical. So just hitting this vertical tab gets me close enough, and I'm happy with that. Then we're going to hit here on masking, and then we're going to get in some exposure. And then we're going to hit brush. And just as a little trick, what I've been doing, actually learned this far too recently, you know, let's just increase it by one stop of light. Obviously that's far too much, but for this example, it works fine. You see how it gets more almost blue? When I mask in some exposure for the shadows, I'm actually going to increase the temperature a little bit, and it just makes it a little bit nicer. It just matches a little bit better. I don't know what it is. I think the temperature of the shadows is just a little bit cooler, so we want to make it just a little bit more of the same. I think this is a little bit too much exposure, so I'm going to drop that down a little bit, maybe a little bit higher. And that's good enough for that. Bring in some light to the trees, you know, just whatever you want to do. It doesn't have to look perfect. You just do whatever you want to do. That looks horrible, so we're just gonna get rid of that. If we want to feel real fancy, we can do another exposure mask, but with just less exposure, and then just kind of brighten up this tree here. And I removed some of this mask. So, you know, went over and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. What you can do is you can hit Alt, and then as you're holding Alt, you just click it and it subtracts the masking that you did. So we'll want to go back in and re-put this on. And I already delivered these photos to this client, so this is just kind of messing around. I don't really mind too much what this ends up looking like. This is just an example to kind of show you the process that I go through editing my photos. This one's pretty good for that one. If we kind of zoom in here, you know, nothing crazy is going on. It's not that bad. We could clean up the driveway a little bit, but afterwards, I'll show you how to get rid of these trash cans after we're done going through all the images. But that's good for this one, so let's go to the next one. And this one, again, far too bright, so we want to come in to where we can see the sky. Hit auto, see what it does. Yeah, okay, I like that. We're going to, again, go into the brush, bring in just a little bit of exposure, increase the temperature, and just bring that in to see what that looks like, see if we like it. You can also use your scroll wheel to make this bigger or smaller. You can also just brighten up this tree like crazy. Cool, looks good. But zooming in, you can see all this crazy, I think this is called halation. What you can do in this scenario is scroll down a little bit to where it says dehaze. You can just create a new brush with this dehaze on, and then just kind of paint it over. See how that looks. You could paint it over the entire rooftop, just to make it look a little bit cleaner. I think I put way too much dehaze on it, but we can always subtract what we have. But this is just to kind of show you the process of how I edit my photos. All right, so let's see what god-awful creation I've made here. So that fixed it a little bit. We can even go through and maybe do a little bit of dehaze above as well. This was just kind of a less than optimal time to shoot this house. It was really last minute. This was the only time I had to do. But for all intents and purposes, this is good enough. With this one, though, I would crop in just a little bit because we've got far too much street. And then just about like that, just to show what the house looks like, and fix our verticals just a tad. It looks horrible. That's fine. We can get rid of it. I think it'll just look better without even using this dehaze. Yeah, let's delete dehaze. That's hilarious. All right, now moving on to the next one. Again, super, super bright. So we're going to drop that exposure down, hit auto on our transform, just see what it does. It's good enough. And then we're going to do the brush. And again, we're going to mask in some exposure and increase the temperature a little bit. Just going over the house. Just right there is about fine. Make sure that it's even brightness all over the house. I would even drop the regular exposure down a little bit more just so we can see more of the house. Good enough. This one, again, first thing I'm going to do is go to transform and hit auto. Then I'll hit vertical, see which one I like more. I like the auto. And then drop the exposure a little bit. Go to the brush. Bring in some exposure. Bring in some warmth. And just paint over everything you want brightened up. The cool thing about this is it doesn't even need to be like these amazing, perfectly professional images every single time. The name of the game is just getting it done as quick as possible. As long as the foundations, like the fundamentals of the photograph is there, like your verticals are fine, you can see the entire house, the camera's not angled in some weird way, it's gonna be good enough and you don't have to fret over, like, are these images great? No, they were literally last time I did this in 30 seconds. So when I came to this house after texting a realtor, I was like, hey, the home's vacant, no cars in the driveway. And he was like, yep. So I drove over there. This is around the corner from where I live, actually. The homeowners were there and they were like putting stuff in the car. So I just walked up to them and I was like, hey, are you guys going to be around for much longer? The realtor just hired me, so I just need to take some quick exterior photos. And they're like, oh no, we'll just move the car across the street. So the guy was literally just off to the left a little bit in his car still. So I banged all these out in literally 30 seconds and then I left. So are these the best images? No, but they got the job done. I sent all the finished ones to the realtor and he was like, these are great. Thanks. Works for me. That's kind of the name of the game. So anybody who spends a ton of time just going over getting, the perfect image, I don't think that's really necessary. Maybe for one of them, like your hero image, the one that's like going to be on the MLS, it's the one that's going to stand out. Yeah, spend some extra time really framing that image up and doing the best that you can. But for all these other ones, you're just showing the house. Who cares? Who cares, man? Don't overcomplicate things. This one's just a slightly different angle. You can see my cars right here. So I'm going to drop the exposure. I'm going to crop this in so you can't see my car. Crop in a little bit on this side. Bob's your uncle. Mask in a little bit of exposure and warmth. Wait for it to load. And then just paint over. Paint over what you want. Do it as much as you'd like or as little as you'd like. Make the sidewalk brighter. Who cares? I'll show you in a sec how to get rid of this street cone. On to the next image. Far too bright. What are we doing here? We're going to drop the exposure so we can see that nice, beautiful beach sky. Hit vertical, hit brush, bring in some exposure and some warmth, and just go over the entire house. Just going here any way you like it. You can do as much as you'd like. Oops. So when you grab this little paintbrush, it'll actually move the entire mask around. Hit undo, undo. It'll go back to where it was. You just kind of brush in a little bit of brightness. If you're feeling real fancy, you can get rid of this really harsh shadow right here a little bit by making a much smaller brush, just getting some exposure in there and just kind of going across that entire line. Doesn't have to look perfect. We can clean it up a little bit. Just makes the shadow not as obvious. Obviously, it's not super easy to do, but again, who cares? You can do as much or as little as you'd like. Paint in what you want. Remove what you want. It's all subjective. You can do none of it at all. You can just slap on the preset and fix the exposure and call it a day. It's really all up to you what you want to do. So this one, I might check into this mask a little bit more and increase the temperature. Yeah, that looks nice. And then one final image. I think it's just a zoomed out version of this shot. Yes, it is. Way too bright, so we're going to drop down the exposure, hit vertical, see what that does. Kind of like just regular. Go into our brush, some exposure, make it real warm, and just go over the entire house. Go up the tree, over the dirt, on the driveway, on the nice picket fence, on the tree, on the brush, and just make it a little bit even right there. Kind of get rid of the little overspray that we did, bring that back. And that's all there is to it as far as Lightroom goes. I missed this little part of the driveway right here, so let's just even that out a little bit. Much or as little as you want to do. But what happens if you want to remove some items? So I do not want these trash cans in this photo. So what do we do now? Well, select the one that we want to edit. We can right click, edit in Photoshop. So once we're inside Photoshop, to get going with Adobe Generative AI, we want to select our lasso tool. So if this says polygonal lasso tool or magnetic lasso tool, we can just right click and select lasso tool and then hold Alt and then use the scroll wheel to zoom in. And then we're just going to outline what it is we want to remove. It's a good note. Everything that's selected and highlighted will change. So be as, careful as you can. You don't want to select too much. You don't want to select too little. And then we're going to hit generate, and this is going to do some awesome stuff. It does take quite a bit of time to do, however, so here we go. And I'm super bummed because I was editing. I literally finished up this entire video and I noticed that the audio was not working. So I had great audio, great dialogue, great examples of things that were going on, and I'm having to redo all of it. So I might not have as witty of commentary because I'm pretty sad that I wasn't recording anything. But it'll give you 3 options once the generation is complete, and you can go through and select which one looks the most realistic. I think this one does, so we're just going to hit Control S and Control W, and then it'll populate that into Lightroom, and we'll see if it does a good result and how it looks. It looks beautiful. Okay, so we're going to do that one more time with this image. We're going to right click and hit edit in Photoshop. And once it's all loaded in, again, we're going to make sure our lasso tool is selected. We're going to zoom in and we're just going to go over this trash can, and hit generate and see what happens. See what's going to create. It's worth it to know I don't ever use Adobe Generative AI to generate new things. I'm always like trying to remove different things. So, you know, it doesn't always give you the best result. Sometimes you have to generate things over and over again. I found that if there's like a shadow that's being cast on from an object that you're trying to remove, like this trash can, if there was like a big obvious shadow that was going onto the wall, it'll try and generate something that would also cast that same shadow, which is really, really annoying. I wish there was like, I've played around with this like crazy, but I wish there was just a command to get it to remove and fill in with background. And I've tried every which way to do that consistently, and I've just had better luck with just leaving the prompt blank. So we can cycle through these and see which one looks best. You know, this looks fine, even if we use this crazy one. So the main subject of this picture is not this house right here. It's this house. So, you know, if it looks a little bit wonky right here, that's not a huge deal, because we're just meant to make it as not distracting as possible. So, you know, obviously this looks, you know, if someone was just looking at this photo for the first time, they would never be able to tell something was changed unless they're a real estate photographer and they're like, oh, I bet you he used a generative AI right there. Just be careful with it. Try and make it look as natural as possible. But if it doesn't, just try and make it look, you know, as much as realistic as you can. Get rid of this pizza slice here. And I'm just going to remove whatever this is too. It's a really magical tool. I feel like generative AI, it only came out, what, like a year ago, 6 months ago or something like that. It changed my workflow entirely for the better. Of course, it made me a little bit lazier than I would like, but it saved me in a lot of occasions because I'm not that great at Photoshop. So being able to just like select something and have it be done is like a miracle. I don't want to spend all this time like getting familiar with Photoshop and learning everything that I need. I take pictures of houses and I film houses and I make virtual tours and floor plans. I have no interest in being a Photoshop expert. I'd rather just pay someone else to do it. But because Photoshop came out with this amazing thing, I don't have to pay anyone. I just pay Photoshop. But for this, let's see how it handles getting rid of all this dirt. You can really just, you can go crazy with it, remove whatever you want. But I wouldn't want to misrepresent a property. Sometimes it'll also give you an error. It just says this service is not responding. Please check again. Just hit generate again and it'll do it. What I was talking about, misrepresentation, you want to be really careful not to change too much of a property. For instance, like grass replacements, I would never do unless the property owner, like the realtor was like, hey, can you replace the grass? We're going to replace it physically anyways, but we can't do photos after that. We just want to get it all done. It'll be done by the time the first open house happens. If that's the case, then I'll absolutely change something like I'll fix this to a green lawn. In general, you don't want to make too many changes in Photoshop to a property that are going to misrepresent it to where someone's going to look at the image, expect something specific, and then go to the property and be like, what the hell? This grass sucks. This window wasn't here, you know, so you got to be careful. I just use it to remove things that I didn't think to remove on site, but then I just want it to be as clean as possible in the actual edit. So we're going to hit Control S and Control W, go back to Lightroom, and we're going to do one more here. So this is a perfect example. So we can remove this cone right here, just draw around it, right? But this fire hydrant right here, I would not remove, because if somebody doesn't see a fire hydrant right here in the pictures, and then they go on the property and they see a giant yellow fire hydrant for all intents and purposes on their property, that would be misrepresentation of a property. That would not go over so well. So I would not touch this fire hydrant. Does it look great in the photos? No. Does it matter? No. Because that's what the property looks like. So we have to make sure that it is represented properly. That's our main job as real estate photographers, is accurately as possible convey what a property looks like without, you know, misrepresenting what everything is. It's a fine line to walk. And I'm sure a lot of the pictures that I take, people are like, oh, that doesn't look realistic at all. It looks too bright. It looks too this. It looks too that. Sure, I agree with you. it looks, you know, I manipulate the light like crazy. So sure, it seems brighter than it actually is. Is that misrepresentation of a property? No, it's just enhancing things that are already there. If I was adding things that weren't there, let's say I added this giant floodlight, that would be misrepresentation. So you have to be really careful, and people will be like, oh, you know, HDR is too crazy, blah, blah, blah. Just take a single exposure. I disagree. Get it done as quick as possible. You don't have to do any crazy things, you know. That's it for that Photoshop, and we can see what the final result looks like. So then I'm just going to hit library, and then I'm going to select all of these and then go back into stacking and collapse all stacks. Then we're going to right click just anywhere because they're all highlighted, and then we're going to hit export and then just export ... We don't want to do export with previous. So it'll bring up this dialog box, and I usually export to a specific folder, either on my desktop or whatever. And I always check put in subfolder just so it can go in its own address. In this case, we'll just do 123 ABC Street. And then that's all you need to worry about for that. Rename to, I do custom name sequence, and then this would just be exteriors. I usually edit my own exteriors and then I export them, and then I get my interiors back from my editor, and then I will drag those back into Lightroom to do my quality control and then export those, and then I name those interiors. Image format, JPEG, limit file size to 3000 kilobytes. That's just what I always do. It seems to be the best. I resize to fit long edge at 2880 pixels. I'm not 100% certain what this does, to be completely honest. I think it upscales some amount if it's like smaller than that. When I first was getting into real estate photography, I played around with it, and this was the most consistent result. And I saw this online, so that worked. Resolution, pixels per square inch, I do 300. Sharpen for screen, amount standard. And then you can remove all your personal information from the photo so you can't dox yourself. And then if you want to do a watermark, if that's something that you're doing with your business, like you have your logo on the bottom right, you can do that right here. I don't. And then I'll just hit export, and then it'll export everything, and you will be good to go. You can also choose what to do right here after export. It'll open up the folder that they're all contained in. Pretty handy. I usually just do nothing or show and explore, whatever. And then you'll hit export and you're finished. Like I said, if you would like to download the images that I was editing in this video just to play around with, I've included all of them in the description below, so you can check those out. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.